Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. How are you?
Not bad, not bad. How was the marathon? You ran it 4 hours?
Yeah, I made it. I mean, it was tough, but yeah, when we finished, we got it done. Should have trained more, but what are you gonna do?
What are you gonna do? It's gorgeous in Alaska, I'm sure.
Yeah, man. So Anchorage itself was kind of I don't know. It's not so gorgeous. I wasn't that impressed with Anchorage, but outside of Anchorage, yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, it's Alaska. I've never been around anything like it, so it was a really cool trip.
Good stuff, man. Well, it should be a fun episode today. Dive into our sponsors. We'll do the two obvious ones right away. Black Box, Will's company, HD Ships, where I recruit agents for. Um, Multi-Service Fuel Card, our newest sponsor within the last, it's been close to a month now. I've had them as a sponsor, but they've been around since 1978. So if you talk about longevity, they've been around before Will and I were alive. Actually, well over the time before Will and I were alive. Great people, Jessica, Patricia over there. Great customer service support. Really good discounts. I know some drivers that use them, and nothing but positive things to say.
Yeah, 100%. And then Trio Services, they do up our back end stuff. It's near shoring. Black Box has a few workers through them. They do great work. Again, any graphics that you guys see is Trio. That's them. Sales Dash CRM, it's a freight centric CRM. Black Box uses it. We love it. It's very user friendly and it's built out for the purpose of freight brokerages, right? So great stuff there. And then our banner sponsor, Task Factoring, great group as well. They're always available. If you guys are interested in a factoring company or maybe making a change, let us know. We can get you in touch with their sales guys. I can't say enough good things about them as a group.
Yeah, no, 100%. Absolutely. We're kind of lucky. We have some really good sponsors all the way around. Just great people, great companies. We got really lucky in that regard.
Yeah, it's definitely cool to partner with companies that we actually like the products, right? Like not just sponsors to be sponsors, but everybody on our platform here. Great groups. Again, can't say enough good things about them.
Yeah, 100%. Well, it'll be fun. Bringing having Chris Jolly on today. I've seen Chris's stuff since I was first on LinkedIn, and we were talking pre-show, but he's one of the podcasters I respect the most. He's not going out and selling anything. He's giving a lot of information out for free. Always positive. Always open, honest individual, and a lot of people I know, including myself, really respect him in the industry, and excited to chat it up with him today.
Yeah, man, I'm pumped about this one. I went on his show, and it was one of the favorite ones I've ever done. It's very genuine. It seems like very real. So without further ado, we'll bring him on, the freight coach, Chris Jolly. How are you, man?
Good. What is going on, fellas? How are you guys?
Happy Friday.
Yeah, happy Friday, indeed. Making it happen.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, man, we always like to get started, and I feel like we need to ask you, right? Because I've been following you for quite some time, and I see your stuff as of late, right? Like I know what you're doing these days, but how did you get into freight to begin with?
Oh, yeah, I come from a family of truck drivers. So when my great grandparents immigrated here from Germany, and they went to Iowa back in the 1930s, and they started driving trucks essentially right then and there. My dad owned his own trucking company, and he was an owner op for 40 years. And I got into it back in I was probably 19 years old when I first got started in transportation. So it's close to 20 years now at this point between working in warehousing, working for a trucking company myself, and then working in brokerage since 2011. So
cool. So you might be one of those few select people that was kind of like, this, I want to be involved in transportation from a young age.
Dude, I wanted to drive trucks ever since I was a kid. Yeah. That's all I ever wanted to do, riding along with my dad. And my dad said he's like, no, I don't. He's like, I don't want you to do this. He's like, go work with your brain, not your back, is what he told me from a very young age. And so that's when I got into sales. And I initially wanted to, I wanted to go work for a trucking company. And I did for a little bit back in Wisconsin, just a very large one outside of Eau Claire. And then after that, I just moved out west from there, and I just got into brokering since 2011.
Nice, man.
How do you like living in Eau Claire? I've been there a couple times. That's a wild town.
Oh, Eau Claire's a fucking amazing spot. It was a great college atmosphere for, I don't even remember how long I lived there, probably like 4 or 5 years. I think it was phenomenal. I loved it.
Did they still have a place called the Pickle?
Dude, the Pickle was just getting started when I was down there. I mean, I lived down there in like 2006. So
Nice. Well, man, through all the stops, which I guess, what's your favorite position that you've had in the industry? Was it on the carrier side, or is it what you're doing today, or what have you enjoyed the most?
oh, dude, what I'm doing today by
Mhm.
a long shot, and that's because I'm doing it for myself now, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm out here building my dreams, and I have this little sign on my desk now that it's just like, I'm either going to dial for my dreams or somebody else's. So it's like when I'm going out there and doing it, man, I like it because like, will you get this, man? There's no playbook to this shit, right? Like there's no
Yeah.
like ultimately when it boils down to it, selling freight's the easy part. Like
Mhm.
frankly, it's the easiest part of the job. It's building your company, it's getting financial literacy behind what you're doing, hiring people, building teams. That's the hard part about it, managing human emotions, So it's like, I think ultimately when it boils down to it, this is by far the most fun I've ever had in business, and especially in this business.
Yeah, man. I mean, to add on to that, so at least for me, like when I was starting, right, kind of what you're alluding to or saying, right? So I was really good at brokering freight, so I'm like, okay, I'm going to start a freight brokerage, and then the skills for the reason like I wanted to do it, like what I was good at, weren't necessarily the things that like I needed to hone in on or learn the most, because like, I mean, people talk about all the time, like what gets you from A to B isn't what gets you from, B to C to D, right? So like all these, what you're talking about, like managing people or things that go along with running a company, it's definitely by far the most growth I've ever experienced as a person, just from what comes along with it, man. The things that you have to figure out. Again, yeah, selling freight is the easy part, but then past that, it gets a little bit more intricate and complicated.
How did you I'm kind of curious because it's interesting thinking about this just now, but obviously Will's company is agent based through a company in Wisconsin. You're agent based, you're sponsored through SBI. I was an agent, I recruit agents. You were a long time W2 employee. What kind of made you make that leap to kind of be an agent? And I know you're, from watching your show, you're kind of a big fan of that model as well.
Yeah. There's no financial risk in being an agent, right? Like that's the thing that, I mean, I think is such a major misconception out there, is that people just think brokers are like, they don't have any overhead, like they don't have to do anything. All they do is just make margin on loads and screw drivers over. I think that's like ultimately what most people think, but it's very expensive to run a freight brokerage, right? Technology, insurance, that's another thing too, right? Like, and that was, I think that like ultimately insurance, having the level of insurance that we have was probably the biggest selling point, because brokers, for whatever reason, aren't required by a lot of carrier insurance, which I think that they all should. But getting indoor with a lot of shippers, that's a major sticking point. And I learned that working for my previous employer, who, we were a startup. One of my best friends started this freight brokerage. I was like the third employee there. And, when we got $250,000 in cargo insurance, that opened up so many doors from a shipper's perspective. And I think that that's one of those things that a lot of people overlook when you're out there. Developing business is hard enough. You don't want to get to the finish line to find out that if you don't have 150 or 200,000 in cargo as a broker, you're not going to get set up. So it's like, that's a major sticking point. And then, cash flow management too. On top of that, like, dude, SPI, just like every single Friday, I get a direct deposit every single Friday without hesitation. From an operating capital perspective, it helps us out so much. They literally take on all the financial risk of this. They prepay the carriers for us before they collect from the customers, and they pay us on top of that. So there's no, hey, we got to get paid from the customer before we pay you style thing, man. It's every 30 days or every week, direct deposit, direct deposit, direct deposit. I don't know how anybody in that startup phase of a business would not want to do that, because you're going to give away a percentage if you have investors, right? If like raising capital, it's not, you can't just snap your fingers and all of a sudden get $1 million out there, which is a major farce on the internet. So for me, having that support in place and then like top tier technology on top of that, it's not like I'm just sending out a fucking pigeon, sending out Raycons, like we got everything dialed in here. So I think from a startup perspective, it's a no brainer.
Yeah, so that was kind of our idea behind it, right? So we got started as an agency and we're looking to transition to the Black Box Authority. But like what you're describing, right? It's plug and play. So like all that stuff, if you're running through the agency model, you're not having to go out and get set up, and really the overheads pretty minimal, right? Especially if you're going out as like a solo agent to get started, it's like the risk is only you.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think that there is a lot of misconceptions, and then man, even like past beyond that, right? Like down here in Birmingham, a lot of people scale agencies, so kind of like we have, right? So like we do have black box authority, and we are shifting to our own authority, but a lot of people just, man, they'll scale an agency and like build it out, and like that's the end goal, right? And you can do that, and it kind of makes sense too if you really look at what goes into like running under your own authority. It's very feasible.
Yeah. I think that a lot of people need to be aware of what they're getting themselves into, because there's nothing wrong if you want to go out and, take that leap of faith from being a W-2. Maybe you want to be a W-2, be a VP for a large established company for the rest of your career. That's great. I think you need to actually accept what you want to do. But if you want to go out there and you want to scratch that entrepreneurial itch, being an agent, I think, I don't want to call it a fail safe because nothing is fail safe, but like it lessens your exposure out there from a capital perspective and a debt perspective. And if you want to do that and then scale your agency and you want to make 100 grand a year or 200 grand a year, you can do that. You don't have to go out and build a multi-billion-dollar corporation. If you want to, it's out there for the taking, and it's a great springboard for you to get up and get running.
Yeah. It's interesting too. I mean, the first year, if you open your own authority, I had someone comment the other week, they're like, why would you be an agent? You could just keep, 100% of your, profit, kind of like what you guys are talking about, all the capital, the back end. But also, I mean, the first year, I mean, no one really wants to work with you if you have a new authority. I was just talking to a friend who opened a brokerage, and that's her biggest problem right now is none of the factoring companies will work with her because she doesn't have the, payment history.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, that's not even the biggest thing. The biggest thing is no carriers will work with you. You can have all the freight in the world, but if you don't have a factoring partner as a startup brokerage, nobody will work with you. Nobody will haul your freight. You're too big of a risk out there, so it's like you could fucking sell, hypothetically and have 1,000 shipments on your board, but you won't have anybody to take your freight because you don't have any credit history that's out there. So again, it's another major misconception in the industry.
Yeah, so that's a big hurdle for us. So what we've done is we've contacted factoring companies to get pre-approved for our invoices, and a lot of them we've been able to work things out. But man, some are just like, no. We offer to prepay it, they won't do it. So especially with all the fraud now, it's heightened risk. Maybe the landscape looks a little bit different today than what it did 5 years ago. But I think that with the heightened fraud, that it is kind of a bigger barrier to entry as far as the factoring companies are concerned with making your invoices viable from the carrier perspective. So yeah, like what Chris is saying, right? So if you're a startup broker and you get 1,000 loads, like, yeah, man, 1,000 loads is great, but if you can't cover them, if you don't have the capacity for it, it's really, I mean, it's not a good thing, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with that, man. I think that these are a lot of things that you need to take into consideration before you do anything, right? Like it's not as easy as a lot of people out there want to make it seem, but like I said, ultimately when it boils down to it, like I said earlier, selling freight's the easy part when you really deduce it down to everything.
Yeah, or even the cash flow, right? So, I mean, if your carriers are net 30, right, and your payables are also, or your receivables are net 30, but like your customer's paying in 45, so that 15-day lag, and you're paying your employees on a weekly or whatever. I mean, it kind of looks like you're losing money for a little while as well. I mean, a lot goes into it. So the agent model they kind of do it all for you, right? So you are giving up a percentage, but man, it's like how much headache do you want to take on, right? If you're, it makes sense for a lot of people. It's like, yeah, happily give up that percentage and not have to deal with any of that because it's a lot.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So what about, obviously you've been in the podcast game, Chris, for, 4 years, and it's kind of funny we're talking about the agent model. I can think of like 5 or 6 people that are pretty active on LinkedIn that talk about the agent model. So I think, social media has some, exposure, but I was talking to Will too, and you a little before the show. I mean, I've always kind of admired the way you've, handled social media. I think I, was listening to your podcast one day. You talked about as soon as you see something negative on social media, you quit scrolling, and sometimes it takes you about 15 seconds right now. But I don't know, maybe you wanted to touch a little bit on that, because I think, your show, what I've watched, I don't watch all the time, but I've watched you try to keep things, very real, not like, a glossy, everything is great, but you're also not, you're sticking to, the industry. You're not just, kind of going off on negativity, tangents.
Yeah. I know negativity sales out there, but I also look at it, long term, what do I want to do for the industry? Just like everybody, like when I first started, yeah, of course I was like, yeah, I gotta, I want to do this, I want to do that. That famous yada yada yada. But then like after a while, man, like I remembered it was like after I had I don't even call it viral, but like I had the largest engagement I ever had on one piece of content, and then the next day, then it fell flat, and I'm like, fuck, what? And then I just kind of got away from that after in due time, and my main thing is, I just want to leave this industry in a better place than what I found it. And it's easy. The easy route is going for the clicks and the downloads and tagging people and talking shit. And there's enough of that out there. But ultimately, this is a real business for me. Like, this is how I support my family. This is how I provide for my family. And I have a system in place. I have a track record that is out there that I'm going to follow and build up on. Like, I can sell this. This is a tangible asset now. So I view it as, it's a brand, right? Like, it is a true brand that is out there, that is recognizable, and it's known for one thing, and education and insight. So I'd be an idiot to deviate away from that. And then ultimately, what does it prove? Like, if I was to jump on and talk shit, what does that prove? Who benefits from that? And that's kind of my thing with a lot of this is I have advertisers. Fortunately, none of them are like, you can only say this. If you follow my content, I speak freely on there. But I also view it as like, what value am I bringing to my advertisers out there as well? Because they're taking a lot of risk, just like you guys have advertisers. They're taking risk from their company to back you guys. And what are you guys trying to do ultimately? And that's kind of my approach with a lot of this. And trust me, I want to go off the rails on a lot of the shit that I see, but I don't. I stop myself in that moment and we're like, all right, who benefits? At this point, again, I'm no better than anybody else out there, but me chiming in on somebody else's post, they would benefit more from it, because then they would have a screenshot of, hey, I got them. So it's just easier for me to back off and then get back to work.
Yeah, I like the concept of scrolling, and then you see something negative and you click out. Yeah, I might have to try that.
Yeah, it's to me, it's easy to jump in and engage with people. It really is. It's easy to jump in and talk shit, and and then like, again, fortunately, I don't have a lot of people who talk shit. Like on my posts or DMs, like I'll get a little bit here and there, but I kind of fucking laugh at it at this point, because I'm like, dude, how did me saying whatever I said throw you that far off course that you felt the need to tell me to fuck myself? So, but I just think like whether it's out there, because it's easy to get consumed with that stuff, man. Like, you can scroll and then you're just like, oh yeah, fuck that person. And you're like, wait, am I going to build a business off of that? Am I going to find revenue off of that? What are my future employees going to think about this? And, some people are going to hear this and they'll probably laugh, but I truly hold myself to the exact same standards of a CEO of $1 billion corporation. That's how I hold myself to. I hold myself to that standard. And I ask myself, would the CEO of $1 billion corporation respond to that? Probably not. Keep scrolling. Get off. Go back to work.
I like that. I like that analogy, because that's true. Honestly, I don't think you see, I'm thinking of some of the $1 billion CEOs in this industry, even some of the $700 million CEOs. I can maybe think of two that are fairly active on social media, at least in commenting on anything. I think there's some. I think the CEO of TQL, I don't think he even has a LinkedIn. And yeah, TQL is probably the most hated company on LinkedIn, and I don't think Ken Oaks even has a LinkedIn.
Here's the thing. If you let anybody else's opinion of you or your business deter you from doing what you're doing, I don't think, like, you don't. Here's what I'll say about TQL. You don't mistakenly become an $8 billion company. All right. I think there's a massive misconception out there when it boils down to it. TQL is not the level that they are because they're bad. I'm not saying that there aren't bad apples out there of every organization, but you don't mistakenly become that big. You don't.
That's that's how I look at it as well. I mean, I'm sure there's, especially when I think that's a big problem just in general with scaling companies is, I mean, you're going to have bad apples if you have a $8 billion organization, I mean, it's hard to control at that point when it gets so big.
And I also look at it like this, and I'm in an entrepreneur group called the Arate Syndicate. I follow Andy Frisella and Ed Milet religiously. I listen to their podcasts all the time, but Andy said this on one of his Real AF podcasts a while ago. He said 50% of the people are going to hate you no matter what. So why even give them any amount of your time? Like, you could literally cure cancer. Like, Will, you could literally cure cancer, bro, and someone's going to fucking hate you. So why pay attention to any of that? Only pay attention to the 50% that are going to support you and be behind you.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot. And then, man, even if you start interacting like that, it can kind of shift your intent, just kind of like you spoke on, right? Like you treat it as it's educational. You have a purpose for why you're doing it, right? And if you start getting mixed up with that kind of stuff, it can change that purpose, right? You can get caught in the weeds. But ultimately, if you're focusing on your why, right, like why you're doing it and holding yourself to those standards, I mean, you're going in the right direction, right? Or even when you talk about interactions, like, negativity sells. It's like, okay, yeah, it does. But then, like, what's the point of it, right? Okay, you're getting all these interactions, but you're doing it for the wrong reasons. It's not doing anything positive. It's like, can you really, go to sleep and feel good about that?
Yeah. No, I mean, and that's exactly it, right? Like, I'm also looking at the after effects of a lot of this. Like, I have a family. I have a son. Do I want my son to hear a soundbite or see some shit of me doing that? Like, dude, like it's a lot bigger than this. And I'm also thinking about, the next 3 to 5 years of my life. What would me spouting off possibly cost me in the future? Especially if it's, I think that there's a big difference between standing on your beliefs and just like talking shit, and I look at it as, again, like, man, I got a business to protect. I have a brand to protect. I have future advertisers who are very fortunate to have them hit me up constantly. Do I want me spouting off on some bullshit to cost me something in the future? No, man. So I just try and look at it a little bit differently.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that, because I think some people maybe don't see, but there's a lot of people who don't engage on LinkedIn or don't comment. Same with podcasts, but read stuff. It's interesting. There's some people that are on LinkedIn every day, but you don't see them ever engage, comment, but they scroll and read. So
that's the majority of man. I don't know what the statistics are, but that's the majority of people that are on social media, or like Twitter or LinkedIn. It's people that aren't creating content, aren't posting, or even really like liking or commenting, but they're just scrolling. So yeah, I mean, that's a great point. You never really know who's looking or seeing, or what you're projecting to the world.
Yeah, and I think, like, who's not to say that your next cold call, that person isn't watching you on LinkedIn, and then they see what you say, and then you call them, and you're like, no, man, I'm never working with you. I see the way that you are. Everybody only posts their highlight reels, right? So it's like, you'll never, from some of the people out there who are the biggest shit talkers, you'll only see them talk about their highlights. They'll never talk about the people who are like, no, actually, I have seen you and I won't work with you because of that. Because it's only a matter of time before that happens.
Well, also, I mean, it's the same way too. I mean, I think some people, you can look like a highlight reel on LinkedIn and you hear, salespeople like, well, what am I doing wrong? Everyone's absolutely crushing it. But I mean, there's things that are said, that, like, I've seen people talk that I know personally have moved 2 shipments in their entire life and talk like they are moving, hundreds or thousands of shipments. I mean, there's stuff like that all the time on, LinkedIn, Twitter, stuff like that. You really don't know. So, I mean, I always tell people, and I don't know if you'd agree, but I mean, just do your own race. Not everyone is out there crushing it, doing, millions of dollars. They might say they are, but that doesn't mean it's true.
I will say this about that, Matt. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time. I've moved tens of thousands of shipments in my career. I can tell based on the way you post if you're full of shit or not. Just like anybody who's ever done anything can tell how full of shit you are based on what you say in your post, because it's not easy. All right. Anybody out there who's actually doing the work will tell you. Like, again, like before we got on, I told you guys, like, I just rocked out a bunch of cold calls. Guess what? I got 15 voicemails. All right. I didn't add anybody today. I didn't crush it today or anything like that, but I'm doing what's required to build your business, because you're never going to go from 0 to millionaire in a minute, like they try and portray out there on social media. Like this shit takes time. This is very hard, especially in this freight market. Nobody's crushing it from that level where, oh, I'm calling everybody and everybody's onboarding me. That's just not happening.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point to bring up, right? Because you do always see like the highlight reel or the end result, but not a lot of people really like document or get real about what it took, right, to get there. Maybe like some people are at the not the end of the road, but like they are like have a big book, right? And they're talking about it. It's like, okay, what did it look like at the beginning? Like the experiences, the struggles that you had to go through to build that book, right? Or then people kind of talking about before they have it, right? But yeah, it doesn't just happen, and there's not a lot of documentation on the work that goes into it. Everybody wants the result, but not the work. And then it's like, okay, like you get this end result. Everybody talks about the end result, but it's like, okay, how do we get that? What do we need to actually do the groundwork? If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. And then again, like I guess ultimately I'm in a unique position in the sense that I've documented my journey since day one. So like people can see the progression and the time it takes to hit different levels, and I try and be as honest as I possibly can. I'm not gonna like blatantly go out there and be like, oh, this is going on in my business, because there is some shit that we do need to keep private. I mean, Will, you know that just as well as anybody. Like, yeah. I can't just be a complete open book, but I want to be as open and honest with people as I possibly can, right? Like we had a sales rep that we hired. It didn't work out. So it's just back down to me and my business partner. That's what we're doing. We're both out there selling. We're both out there operating. We're both out there trying to build this up. So I never want any illusions that I've got it all figured out and we're way bigger than people think. Because again, like my production value has gone up exponentially. I have a marketing guy who handles all of my shit now for my podcast. So it looks a lot bigger than it really is. But there's just a couple of us who work really hard to make this happen.
Yeah. And that's a whole nother world too. I've heard you talk about this, but I mean, people don't realize. I mean, I can think of one or two massive YouTube people in the trucking community who, I've heard from multiple people, you can buy followers, you can buy subscribers, and there's people that do that, So I mean, that's where, it's not what you see, sometimes.
Yeah. Here's the thing. You can buy everything but impact. All right. You can buy downloads. You can buy followers. You can buy subscribers. You can buy everything. All right. It's all for sale. I get DMs from these people all the time asking me to on in Instagram, everywhere, hey, we can buy followers. We can do this. But here's the thing. I can't buy changing somebody's life. All right. By putting out the right information for people. Just like with, and I talk about this often about all the underbelly of the bullshit courses that are out there in the industry, right? Like you don't need to pay for anything. You could listen to my podcast. You could listen to this podcast. You could listen to other industry podcasts and learn everything you need to know about this industry and not pay a fucking dime to some of these people who've never even brokered a load before. So it's like, for me, ultimately, that's what it's about. I want people to see that step-by-step process in building this out and realize like, damn, I don't need to go pay $800 or $900 for this. There's a laundry list of content creators who are actively in the industry doing the work that I can just follow them and get all the insight that I really need.
People are really helpful too. I mean, if you connect with people, who you respect and, you have enough knowledge to know that they're who they say they are and they're good at sales. But a lot of people are willing to help you for free, if you do it in the right way. And like you said, I mean, there's so many podcasts out there. I mean, Will and I try to have at least 2 shippers on a month, just because we think that people helpful to hear from shippers. And when I was new and when I was brokering, that was my favorite podcast. I go search through yours, through Freight Caviar, and I'd go like try to find when the shippers were coming on because it was fun to hear from them. So I mean, there's just so much information out there. The idea to pay for something, I don't know. I have friends who do it. I don't judge it, but a lot of the content that's paid out there, I don't think is worth it, in my opinion.
I think that when it comes to like hearing from shippers and everything, because I mean, I have a shipper on at least once a month to do Q&A shows, right? Like where you ask them anything. And the ultimate, like if you deduce it down to anything, every single one of them have said, be prepared before you call me. Like, don't just call me for the sake of calling me, because they can tell instantly. And it's like, and then, furthermore, you should expect them to pick up the phone when you call, right? Like you shouldn't be surprised that somebody answered. So it's like, I think doing that, I mean, that's the biggest thing. And again, real feedback that I get out there from my prospects, and this doesn't mean that they're going to onboard you today, but they all have a folder of people that they're going to reach out to when they need to, and they have a folder of people that they will never reach out to under any circumstances.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I love, be prepared for them to answer, anticipate the actual conversation. Man, we had Will Jenkins on a couple weeks ago, and one of his big sales things was like, you just be normal, right? I feel like a lot of people, they might not be expecting the answer, and they answer, and they just start talking really fast, and it's uncomfortable and awkward. Man, but backtracking a little bit to just like what's at our fingertips, right? It's 2024. So even beyond like the podcast and courses, if you just do a little bit of research, like Google, you can find out like a lot of information, right? It's at our fingertips. It's 2024. We're not back in 1960, right? The internet is here. And man, even in-house, like at Blackbox, people come ask me questions, and man, I won't know it. And I'll sit there and like, I'll Google it in front of them and just like read off the list. And it's like, man, I don't know what it is about like this day and age, but like the problem solving skills are just seeking out information for our own. Like a lot of people just want somebody to, come do it for them, or like implant in their brain. It's like, man, it's right there. Just, you have Google, you can figure it out.
Yeah. And I think that's, I'm right there with you, man. I think that you have more information at your fingertips now that's free than you ever did. But that right there is all you need to know about where your competition stands. If you're not even willing to Google something, like, how are you going to move freight? So it's like, that's the shit that I have playing in my head. Like, it's only a matter of time, right? Like I tell myself this all the time. I'm only one call away. I'm one call away. I'm one call away. That's what goes through my mind. I have all of the same anxieties that everybody does when you're picking up the phone, because you just never know who's on the other end of the line. It's a crapshoot. But I know ultimately nobody to this day has ever reached through the phone and punched me in the face. So, the worst thing that's happened is I've been hung up on. But ultimately, I would say 99% of my interactions with people are positive. They really are. They might not be the most cheery person in the world, but they're going to shoot you straight, and it's because I'm prepared, right? Like, I'm not calling a cheese manufacturer and saying I got flatbeds for them,
Well, I think so much you hit on a good point. You talk about this too. I mean, you're big, heavy into open deck and heavy haul. When I was a broker, I couldn't tell you the most simple stuff about heavy haul and, dimensions and everything. I moved seafood into Costco and other places, and I knew seafood and reefer, fresh, frozen. I mean, don't get me wrong. I did, some bentonite, some colorants on flatbeds, but very, very little, because I didn't understand it. It was like, seems complicated to me. I didn't like geometry where food was tangible and I understood it. You don't need to know about every aspect of the industry and every different mode to get customers. You just need to know and do your research on what you're reaching out to. You could, in my opinion, be an absolute idiot on about 85% of the industry, but still make money if you do your homework and are targeted and know about the businesses that you're reaching out to. That's my opinion. I don't know, but
yeah, I mean, I really think that you need to just, and that's why I always talk about like knowing your niche and sticking down to it. And especially when you're getting started, because it's from a repeatable, scalable process. Because that's another thing that you need to focus on when you're building anything is you need to build a system immediately. Like, and you need to follow that system, and then you need to make changes to that system, right? Like, there is no one set way. You evolve, because everybody sucks when they start, right? And that's like, I have all of my first content still out there on my YouTube channel. All right. Everybody sucks when they first start. Just like with cold calling, everybody sucks when they first start, but you get better in time. And how do you get better? Reps and saying the same shit over and over again. Now, at this point in my career, I can call a full truckload food shipper just as well as I can call a full truckload open deck shipper, because I've done both of them at scale, and I've done that repeatable throughout my career. So I think, like, but again, if you don't know where to start with one thing, evolve out and branch out from there.
100%.
Got a comment from Chris. Hard to grow if you add business, create processes that cannot scale. So yeah, Chris, kind of like what you're talking about. That's something that we struggled with at the beginning. We didn't have a lot of systems and processes in place. We were adding people, growing quickly, and then at a certain point, it's like it's harder to duplicate if it's not documented, right? And then past the documentation, like everything is constantly evolving and changing, right? So like revisiting those processes, looking for ways to optimize efficiency, and editing as you go. But yeah, that's a great point.
Well, that's the thing is you got to think about that as you're building your business up, right? And this is something that I struggled with for the first couple of years, right? Is I don't write anything down. It's my biggest weakness is I don't write anything down. I know what I'm doing. I know what to do and say. But if I was incapacitated for a month, is my business going to be able to run still? Are people going to be able to do that? And that's where writing shit down and building out processes, and it's easier to do it right away than it is. And Will, I'd like to know your opinion here. It would probably have been a lot easier just to start writing shit down when you first started than it was after you had 5 people. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait, we got to get organized.
Yeah, 100%. So it actually even went further than that. We really didn't hone down into it until we were, close to like 20 people, right? So the kind of like what you're talking about, the way I see it is the concept of taking this tribal knowledge, right? Like I've been brokering for a while, and I have a pretty good understanding of how to operate myself, right? But then when I bring people in, and I tell them one time, I can't just expect for that to click, right? So I need reference points for them to look at and like work through, like workflows, right? So again, yeah, it's tough. It's tough to go back and do it, especially once you get people going, and then maybe they've adopted some less than optimal habits, right? And they're doing one thing one way, and then you're like, no, we actually need to do it this way. And then trying to get that buy-in as opposed to bringing people in from day one and showing them, hey, this is how we do this, and this is why we do it. And then you're not having to backtrack. Because again, man, it's much easier. It's like, man, this is going to be strange, but it's like with a dog, right? You know, the saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. If you get a puppy, right, you raise them a certain way and teach them the tricks, like they know how to do it, right? Then the dogs shouldn't. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I know what you mean, man. And it's the truth, right? Like I would rather take somebody with no industry experience than 10 years. And I'm because of that statement right there, Will. I'm not saying experience is bad by any stretch of the imagination. So I don't want that to come across that way. But it's a lot easier to train people in your system who don't have a preconceived notion on how things are done than to teach somebody who's been doing this one way for 10 years. Hey man, you're wrong. This is how it's done now. I've experienced that. And maybe it's because I'm almost 40 years old, but like it is a lot harder to change people as the more and more that they're ingrained in their own way.
Or even as just as an organization, right? It's a major issue if somebody comes in and they ask like 3 different people that have been here longer than them, and they get 3 different answers. It's like, man, that's chaotic. That's not good. That's not sustainable, right? So there needs to be, kind of like a game plan, right, so to speak. You know, like systems and processes, and then as you start to scale, man, if you're scaling, like right, if you're onboarding people, it's likely because of an increase in business, right? So then if you're trying to juggle that business while going back, it's just not ideal, right? So yeah, it makes sense to do it as you go and then revisit and keep constant tabs on it. Because again, man, a lot of our processes, things that we had in place aren't the same today as when we first did it, right? I mean, there's a lot of things that we've had to reevaluate where maybe we were hardline, right? Like, hey, this is the way to do it. And then after being exposed or just being open-minded and humble, like look back and be like, like I was wrong. You're right. Maybe we should do it this way, reconsider. And then we've changed things. So nothing's super concrete. The principles of the business are, but like how we do things like that does change depending on tools that we acquire or just things that we learn, right?
And you need to be adaptable to that. And you need to understand that you're going to fuck everything up.
Yeah.
You know, like you're not just going to get it right away. Like you're going to learn. And then you know what? You're going to reach a point where you're like, damn, there is a more efficient way to do this. Let's change it. This worked. And you just got to go through it, right? Like nothing that we're doing, hopefully it will turn out to be fatal, right? You know what I mean? Like it's okay to fuck up. And you need to be open to that, especially when you're going out there and doing it on your own. Like you're going to make every mistake possible. And as soon as you think you have it all figured out, you're going to get hit with something. Like I will talk about what I'm going through right now after we're through it, but I'm going through something right now that I've never experienced in my life. We're getting through it, but I'm like, holy fuck, how did this even happen? But here we are, we're getting through it. And then this is only going to make us stronger though. Like the longer down the road, we're going to be able to become more efficient. And that's the beauty of going through challenging situations. Ultimately, you get better, like you're not going to learn unless you mess things up. And then you do, and then you're able to identify it earlier in the process. So something that might have taken you 3 months, now you can get it knocked out in a month. That's where the improvement really lies.
I think you said a good point too earlier, just backing up a little bit, about rather hiring people without experience. We had the COO and co-founder of Hometown Logistics that I think started in 2017. They scaled. They're about $300 million right now. And there's not too many brokerages I can think of that are started in 2017, 2018 that are now 300 million. They only hire people without experience. They don't hire any people with industry experience. And he said on our show, we hire a lot of criminals and bartenders. And that's a $300 million company that started in 2017, and they're hiring zero people with experience. So it was kind of interesting to hear, but his reasoning for it made sense, kind of exactly what you guys were saying.
Yeah, I mean, man, pretty much everybody that we've hired, except maybe 2 to 3, came without experience. Because, man, really, at the end of the day, I mean, yeah, there's some companies like C.H. Robinson that are a bit more advanced, but at the end of the day, man, we're all kind of like doing the same thing. And really, it's logistics, but it's not that complicated. If you're doing over the road logistics, A to B, like everything can be taught and learned. It's not like, man, you don't have to go get a 4-year degree to be a freight broker. You don't. You really, man, I think ultimately the most important thing for just speaking from like a cradle to grave broker is just the man, I don't want to say like discipline, but like the motivation to like go get it and stick with it, the resiliency. I think it's a lot of more intangibles than it is, like hard skills per se.
Yeah.
I should clarify quickly too. He clarified in the show, he didn't mean like he was hiring people with like rob banks and, anything crazy like that. He was just, well, he wasn't, he just said criminal in a sense that, I don't know how he described it, Will, but I just wanted to clarify that for anyone watching.
Yeah. No, he said not criminals, right. But just more so like, they didn't take the traditional route, right? Like maybe they didn't have a 4-year degree. Maybe they're bartending or took a different type of path of like work some odd jobs. Those were his favorite hires, right? So, he didn't mean just like we're just, looking at, the release list from the prison and bringing them in.
That's funny.
Yeah. Well, Chris, do you have a few more minutes? I know you said that you had a kind of a hard cutoff at 45, or do we need to wrap this up?
No, I mean, we can go for a couple more minutes here.
Cool.
I'm trying to, I guess, what are your thoughts, Chris? We've been talking a lot of our guests lately on AI and automation, and you're hearing a lot about that lately. I remember watching a Brad Jacobs clip basically saying that he thinks, the freight broker current model is going to be dead in 10 years and that he wouldn't recommend his kids to get into it. And that's a more extreme, opinion, but you hear kind of both sides on it. Just kind of curious what your thoughts are on all the AI automation out there right now.
I always think ultimately there's always going to be something, that could potentially derail your career or, or adaptation. I think that the real players out there are going to succeed no matter what. There's always something that's going to be thrown at you in business, life, no matter what, that could possibly deter you. And I got a ton of respect for Brad Jacobs, and he could very well be right. He very well could be, or he could be wrong, just like a lot of people. I think AI is definitely here and it's going to be a thing, but I will never get behind something that blatantly puts people out of work. Because what are we going to do? What are all of these people going to do? Aimlessly walk around and be reliant on the government? Fuck that. Like I think that it's a great tool that's out there, but what are these people going to do? And I think at some point, and I'm not about government intervention in fucking anything, but at what point, when are we going to look a few years down the road and be like, damn, if everything gets AI driven, what are the 150 million working adults going to do all day? So I think like, is it a thing? Yeah, but there's always going to be a threat. There's always going to be something out there. I pay attention to things, but I don't let it deter me from acting.
It would be fun. I always think, and I'm maybe one of the few people that thinks this, but it'd be fun like in the late 90s, early 2000s when there was some technology, but not all, like sitting in like an Iowa freight brokerage or trucking company in the middle of nowhere. And I don't know, it would be a fun time to be alive. I don't know. I'm probably one of the crazy people who thinks that, but
what a crazy thing to say. Such a freight broker thing to say. Like, I'd love to be alive in like the late 90s with like no technology and be slinging freight.
Well, no, I said late 90s, early 2000s, like when you could still have like flip phones and you could still, some things were around, but like, I don't know, would be a fun market, I feel like back then, But,
I mean, yeah, it's definitely changed, man. A lot of the tools that we have today, I mean, they make our life much easier, like a lot more visibility, right? So, I mean, I'm kind of with you, Chris, as far as the, I don't who really knows, right? But
Yeah.
I think that, I mean, at least what we try to do is when we like see tech and are exposed to it, we try to look at where can we implement this to make our people more efficient, but not necessarily how can we replace them, right? I think that it'll do a lot of that. I think it might change day-to-day tasks of individuals, but I don't necessarily think that it'll just eliminate jobs. I think that maybe the jobs that we're doing might change. But who knows, man? So Andrew Yang ran for president. That was his whole thing. It was like the freedom dividend because we're all going to be out of work because of AI. So who fucking knows? John Cross made a comment. He said, "Will AI take that 1 o'clock phone call from a driver needing a comp check?" Well, AI probably doesn't sleep. So I mean,
yeah, I would say 100% it probably will one day. In its current structure, maybe not, but like eventually it will.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, man. So like we use some automation, and I've got like a couple of bots, right? And that's one thing I always say. It's like, man, the bot doesn't sleep. So if it's acting on my behalf for like a 1 a.m. tender, like it does it. So that is maybe some of the pros to some of this technology, right? It's like it just runs 24 hours. It doesn't have bad days or sick days, or it doesn't get in a bad mood and just like not show up or it just does what it's supposed to do, what it's programmed to do. And I mean, I kind of love it,
Yeah, no, I agree.
Well, what's the next year look like for you, Chris? Any big big travel plans, big things, with the business, or you're just kind of grinding, it sounds like.
Locked in, man. I've pretty much eliminated any and all travel except for revenue generating travel is really what it boils down to. And I do, man, like as somebody who's bootstrapping all this shit, I got a finite window to make this work. And I can't make it by fucking going to conferences for the sake of going to conferences. Like, with all due respect to a lot of them out there, none of them are going to teach me anything that I need for where my business is right now. Not one of them is going to teach me a new revolutionary way to cold call. Not one of them is going to teach me a new revolutionary way to develop business. I'm already doing it. So it's like, eventually one day, yeah. But like right now, man, I got to dial in. I got to lock in. I got to scale this company up. There's going to be probably some exciting things that are going to happen out there. But again, I just got to focus on controlling what I can today. And then when I wake up tomorrow, controlling what I can tomorrow and kind of take it like that. So yeah, I have very big goals for what I'm going to do in the future, but they will never be accomplished unless I do what I need to do tomorrow.
That was kind of an electric statement. Just like block out the noise, like keep track. Like I love that. Like I'm ready to like get off this call, like go run through a brick wall.
You're talking about freight specific conferences too, right? Because I was going to say, Will and I have a buddy of ours who's I think like $25 million agency, and all he does is go to like random manufacturer conferences with him and his team. Like every other week he's in one. He just sits at the hotel bar most of the weekend and then just ends up with a customer. It's a very unique strategy, but it seems to work for him.
Yeah, I think that everybody's got their thing, man. And if I'm going to look at where am I going to allocate my budget towards, it's going to be driving around and shaking shippers' hands here in doing that, as opposed to full transparency. If the account was worth the $1,000-$1,500 it would cost to travel out there to see him right away, yes. But is that going to be the most effective way to allocate my funds? Not at this juncture. I think it's the best way to allocate anything is to get out there locally here in Phoenix and meet as many people as I can.
I mean, I think that's the way to do it, is identify like what works for you, like what you're planning, and stick to it. I think a lot of people maybe hear, the way one person does it, the way another person does it, and they're kind of like crisscross between a whole bunch. They're not honed in. Kind of like what you're describing. It sounds like, block out the noise, like stay to the course, and like it will happen. And like that's why I think it's so electric, because you're so certain about it. And like I know it's going to happen for you if you're like have that mindset and you stick with it. And you're like, this is what I'm doing, and like nothing, like block out the noise, stay the track. Like that's electric.
Yeah, and I'll say this, and I got to jump here, but I look at it like this: the only thing that's between me and achieving my goals is the time it's going to take me to get there. That's it. I've literally blocked out and I've eliminated so much shit from my life. And if a camera followed me around 24/7, 365, you guys would be like, he's the most boring motherfucker that's out there. Because I follow my routine. I follow my system. I stay in my system because I know it's effective. But I appreciate you guys having me come on. And I would love to continue to have you guys on the show here in the future and everything. We'll continue to make it happen. But I got to jump. I got to get back to work. So
yeah, man. Well, thanks for spending your Friday with us.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Take care, you guys.
See ya. That was fun.
Yeah, man. Episode 22. Yeah, he's a good guest. Always enjoy talking to him.
Yeah, no, wealth of knowledge for sure. Well, shout out to our sponsors, Black Box, HD Ships, obvious, where Will's company, HD Ships, where I recruit agents. Then our MS multi-service fuel card, around since 1978. Great rates, great communication, great people. If you're looking for longevity, I mean, we're hearing businesses go out of business left and right. These days, if you've been around since 1978, I don't think you're closing your doors anytime soon. Sales Dash CRM. Will is a customer now. I've known Josh for a while. Great individual. He's probably one of the most rising freight tech companies out there. Well, just thinking about that now, just kind of his growth over the last year or two.
I mean, yeah, they have a badass software. So I mean, that surprised me. Once we did the demo, we were sold. All my people love it.
And that was Will did not know. You did not know. That was not like some type of like prior thing that you had known about. You just went in looking for a CRM, and it sold it. So.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we love it, and it's reasonably priced. I mean, yeah, even if Josh wasn't a sponsor, we would continue using Sales Dash. It's been a game changer for us.
And last but not least, our banner sponsor. They're sponsoring the BrokerCarrier Summit. I know those guys will be down there in Texas. I think Ryan and Rob. Great company, great communication, great rates. Top 10, company in terms of size. I think they have someone answering the phone until midnight every night. Reach out to Ryan or Rob if you're looking for, a factoring company, especially in this type of market. I mean, factoring is huge.
Yeah, great group over there. And then so Trio Services, they do all our back end stuff. Nearshoring company, Black Box has a couple of workers through them. Do great work. Again, if you see any cool graphics, that's the Trio guys. But yeah, that'll do it for episode 22. We'll be back at it next week. Check the pages for the announcements of the upcoming shows. But that'll do it.
We'll be back Wednesday, and we're actually lining up some guests for the next couple weeks now. So it'll be a fun month. So
100%. Well, good deal, Matt. Enjoy your weekend, and I'll talk to you soon here.
Sounds good. I always enjoy the Michael Vick number 7 in the corner of the office. I'm going to miss that in October. So
who knows? Maybe it'll make the trip with me. We'll see. Probably not.
All right. Have a good weekend.
All right. See ya.
Yeah.